Afternoon, YouTube. Just thought I'd do a video on my single speed to kind of carry on that bikes that I own and bikes that I've built and things like that as well. So this here is my single speed, one of my favourite bikes, to be honest. Originally only had an on-one Inbred, which you can see here on one, which was geared. And then I had a shot of a customer's bike who had had a on-one Inbred single speed. That was hooked. I actually been wanting single speed for a while. So this is the current iteration of the one that I have. I've had a few changes. I've had a few other single speeds that were 26-inch wheels, V-brakes rather than disc brake and all that kind of stuff as well. But it's slowly evolved. It was originally meant to be a cheap bike that I can leave outside Tesco's and just put a basic lock in it, and it's slowly but surely not becoming that, but that tends to be the way things with my bikes. Just because I own a shop and I get things trade price, I always feel like, well, it's not a lot of money, and then when you actually calculate the retail cost of it, it is a significant cost. So we'll start from the front, okay? On the front we have basic ETC grips. ETC is a brand that I deal with. The company is Large, who own ETC, and they do some pretty decent stuff. These grips are okay. They're a little sore on the hand. As always, camera's not on focus, there we go. It can be a little sore on the hand if you're not using gloves, but I ride with gloves most of the time I'm out, so it's not a major issue. On the brakes, we have, these are Light Pro, I think, yeah, Light Pro, ultra light, really sexy. Definitely a really nice set of levers. That's usually get everybody when they look at it because it's just so clean. From there we have a set of rental fat bar carbon. It's the light version, so these are 740 to correct my last video which said 182 and it should have said 800. So these ones are 740 with a smaller rise. I think it's like a 30mm rise, something like that. I need to double check. And 31.8 clamp. You do got 35, I think, but it just meant changing stems and things like that, so didn't bother with that. On the other side is your Light Pro ultralight lever as well. Of course, no shifters. Keeps it looking very clean because no gears. It's just the one gear. That's about it. It has an on-one Inbred frame. Inbred frame used to be Planet X owned, well still Planet X owned, but on-one was their mountain bike brand and Planet X was their road bike brand, but since then they've acquired Holsworth and things like that as well. So it tends to be everything comes out as Planet X nowadays. But the Inbred was renowned around the industry as a cheap steel frame that could do just about everything. Yes and no. I would say it's a great tour bike. It's a pretty good single speed bike, but it's not a good mountain bike. Simply because the headset on it's 71 degree, it's just far too steep for anything mountain bikey. If it was a 69 degree head, it would actually be one of the most perfect frames out there for 29ers. And I would like it to done fatter tyres, but that's another debate. But other than that, it's steel frames. DN6 steel frames. Here's your little Inbred dude. It is horizontal dropouts, so the back wheel just slides out to tension the chain. So essentially it's the same bike as the geared Inbred, just with a different dropout on the back end. Everything else is pretty much the same from there on in. Slightly slack seating angle, but still not that slack of a normal mountain bike, so it's quite straight up. So it makes it a really good pedaling bike, it makes it a really good climbing bike, makes it a really good tour bike, but as I say, I don't make it a particularly great mountain bike. So moving on, we have a crappy stem. Don't know where it comes from. I think actually a lie. I think that's actually I think it's a Carrera stem, something like that. I don't really care. It's not going to go down the side of a hill, and it's the right length, so it does the job. I do have a fair bit of stack on top of here. That's because I don't know if I'm going to use these forks or anything else. So I just left the steer length the way it was. It doesn't matter too much to me. I don't really care that much about it. Q-lock again on this one. Slightly shorter than the one that was on the fat bike, which is slightly longer because when you put the light on and things like that and feel the bits and pieces, the fat bike needed the phone slightly further away. This one is to be as light as possible, so I took the arm off, and it's just to keep the bike as light as it can be, pretty much from there on in. A sealed bearing headset, basic headset, it's nothing special, works perfectly fine. I think it was an eBay headset, I don't think it was even that expensive. Zephyr FM30 front deflector. I like these ones. You get the FM20, which is the shorter one, and the FM30, which is the one I've got. I tend to do these in the shop, $14.99. Really good ones compared to Mudhugger. I'd say better. And the Mudhuggers don't have a line underneath here, and if it's really muddy, mud can come round and it'll grab the mudguard and it'll try and suction it off. Whereas this one has a couple of lines underneath here, which breaks up the muds when it comes through and stops it from creating that vacuum and sucking it from the fork. Moving on to the forks. On this bike it has a set of exotic forks. Exotic are also known as carbon cycles, which are now also known as disco brakes. And slightly company can't decide on what they actually call themselves. So these are the exotic carbon. They are the longest ones that exotic do, which was intentional because I wanted to raise the front end up as much as I could in this bike because it being such a steep head, so it's just to try and kind of angle it out a little bit more. So fully carbon tubes and stuff like that, light as a feather. I can't recommend enough the exotic forks. Every time I've had them, never had an issue. They actually do really good stuff. Sadly, they don't have a B2B, so I can't sell them in the shop. Otherwise, I would. It's really decent stuff. Moving on from there, we have a Carrera wheel set on it, and they were from a Carrera MX2. I think that's their hybrid bike, something like that. It has a 60 TPI Maxxis Minion SS on the front, which I think is this the bike that has it? No, it's the right way around. I think it's the back side. I've got the tyre wrong way around, but it doesn't really matter too much. It's not really going off-road. So the Minion SS is Maxxis' kind of fattest hybrid tyre they do. Tubeless ready, so these are tubeless setup with the ghetto tubeless style that I normally do on all my bikes if the wheels are not designed to be tubeless originally. So they have kind of buzz cut on them. So you've got a big chunky knobblies on the sides, but with a small buzz cut knobbly on here, and so it looks kind of flattish and really good at cornering. Still got a lot of grip when you're off roads, but still very fast on the roads. One of my favourite tyres for an intermediate bike. I cannot recommend them enough. So this one is the 60 TPI, whereas the back one's 120 TPI double density, and so it's basically a tyre within a tyre. It doesn't really matter so much because I'm running tubeless, but it was just to try and make it as strong as possible, long lasting as possible. I'll get to that when I get to the back of the bike though. On here we have the 203 Avid rotors with a cheap Zoom caliper. So that's their version of a TRP Spire. It's just, I like the red, and TRP Spires are freaking expensive and they don't do them in red. So I just thought I'd give it a go. Are they any good? Yeah, not really. I had to put new pads in it because the pads were crap and really hard wearing and never braked, and they don't have a lot of power. But as I said, this is not a bike for absolute hammering it down the trails. Although I do take it off-road substantially. And it does get a little bit of a hammer sometimes, but carbon forks, carbon bars, carbon seat posts. I'd be a little bit careful with it, you know. So you've got your Redefine Your Limit nuke-proof sticker, which I have on quite a few of my bikes because I use the nuke-proof bottom brackets mostly. Not on this bike though. This one still has a Shimano one. It's not broken yet, so when it breaks, I will put a nuke-proof one on it. It has a Tiagra left side crank, but it actually has a Diori right side crank. It's just what I had lying around at the time. It will, you know, whenever when it breaks at some point, I'll change it, but it's irrelevant right now. It doesn't matter too much. Jag is slightly lighter than the Diori, so I suppose it saves a little bit of weight, but it doesn't really change anything. It's still 172.5 or 172.5 on that side, so it works perfectly fine. Your quack factor is not really affected because I've adjusted it out with the spacers, so it's not a major issue at all. Same goes with the back here. We have the Zoom caliper, 203 avid rotor. On the back, because this is a single speed with a horizontal dropout, these are your tensioners. So I had to make longer screws because the tensioner is actually slightly too big for a quick release. It's designed for an 8mm screw in or a BMX's 10mm axle, but it was just the ones I had around at the time. Says it's just really for mucking around and stuff like that. It's not it was never meant to be an expensive bike originally. Just looking at my my brake, what the hell was I doing here? It must not have fitted, and I didn't have the right adapter at the time or something like that. But that looks like a 160mm adapter with a 203 adapter on top of it, with a couple of couplers to try and push the caliper up. No idea why. Actually, I think I do. Actually, that's a lie. I think it's because this caliper never stays straight because the lugs aren't welded straight. Sure, that's what it was. So I had to use these to try and allow the caliper to move in the proper position so that it didn't rub when it was going round. And that's why they're on it. Looks kind of funky, but hey, it works. It's fine. I'm a big guy, and it breaks me, so it's not a major issue. So there's your Maxxis Minion. Excuse the upside downness. 120 TPI times 2, 60 psi. Max rated. It actually runs around about 50 psi because it's single speed. It's to try and create as little amount of drag as possible. But usually what happens is I'll let it go down to about 40 psi and I'll go, alright, and you pump it back up again. So right now it's probably, actually right now it's quite flat. So I'll need to pump it back up at some time soon. There's your Inbred sign. And Chinelli seat. Nice seat. I really like it. I think I bought it for another bike that I had. And I put it on this one and it suits it really well. But it's the most uncomfortable seat on the planet. Oh my god, my ass. I cycle bikes every day and my ass hurts on that friggin' saddle. But it suits the bike really well. And so when I become a Selly SMP dealer, it will go to a TKR. I'll try and get one that's white and black to try and match the frame and stuff like that. But I quite like to see it as it is. Bike does have a mud hugger rear, and yes, hell of a lot you don't like them, and a hell of a lot you do. It's definitely a Marmite kind of thing going on there. But you know, this bike goes through the winter. This is like a winter bike to work, and that stops my butt from getting soaking wet and freezing when it's kind of like slushy and snowy conditions. It also stops my butt from getting muddy if I'm cycling out to Pennycook to go visit my dad and stuff like that. Go down the old drill line. It's mine, so this really helps. That somewhat helps because it only comes to here, so your feet still get the mud coming up and getting there, and your legs will get the mud coming up to about your knee. But you know, what else am I going to do, really? It does run lights normal in the front, which I'll probably put on when if I ride it today. That light tends to stay on the back of it all the time. It's just a little charge thing. It flashes. It lasts for bloody ages. The one bottle round on it, the gear ratio is 36 by 19. Most people might run like a 36-20, but because this is primarily on the roads, it's a slightly harder gear, so when you're going up a hill you've really got to give it some guns. They actually better keep the cadence up, keep the bike as much speed as possible, because if you slow down it actually becomes harder to cycle, and if you slow down then you've just got to let you plod. It's like you move from right to left to right to left with your weight, and it just plods you up the hill and there's no speed. And the amount of times you push that shifter on the front which isn't there because you're like, I'm going to change gear, but you can't. You just got to roll with it. But anyway, so that is the all-in-one Inbred 29er single speed bike that I have. Hope you enjoy your day. Bye bye now.